Hey everybody, welcome to Variant Intel. Today we have episode 18, and today is a very, very special episode. Our very first developer interview. We have today with us from Midnight Society, AJ Helling. He's the senior QA engineer. AJ, how's it going today?
How's it going? I'm having a great day. How are you doing?
I'm great, man. It's Friday. We're doing Friday Night Deadrop tonight. So if everybody hasn't checked it out, they're even doing a thing where you can sign up a friend. So make sure to join the Discord, check Twitter, make sure you go to midnightsociety.com and all those things so you don't miss out on that stuff. And again, we have AJ here today. It's our first developer interview. Big shout out to Midnight Society leadership for helping work and coordinate all this. I really personally appreciate it, AJ. It's great to have you. Give us a little bit about your background and what you did before Midnight Society, and then what led up to working with Midnight Society and all that stuff.
Yeah. So when it really got started, I was 18 years old. And I was working for the Portland Trailblazers at the time. I was doing like ushering, scanning tickets at the door, things like that. And I was like, it's about time to find, a full-time job, right? So where's the first place you look? Craigslist.
Yeah, hey, there
And
you go.
the very first thing that just so happened to pop up was a QA job. They're like, "Do you like playing video games?" I'm like, "I sure do." And they're like, "Do you want to test them?" I was like, "Sure."
Mhm,
And so I go in for an interview, and it goes it goes really well. They had me prepare a bug report. At
mhm.
the time, I had no idea what that meant. They kind of gave you like a brief understanding, and the goal was to go play a game and find a bug and then do what you think a bug report would be on it. So at the time, this is 2018,
Mhm.
2019. Fortnite obviously was the biggest thing in the world.
Oh yeah.
And so I hopped on Fortnite, and there was a bug in the shop where the first panel of skins would be duplicated into the second panel. Every time you opened it, I was like, wow, that was super easy.
Yeah.
So I like wrote up like this bug report. And what's funny is I even have it still in my Google Docs.
Mhm.
I just found it like a couple weeks ago, and I was looking at it and I thought it was super funny. But I actually got some of the things that you would need to know in a bug report. And so
Mhm.
um this was in so I'm originally from Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
Um and they the office that they had, they weren't hiring anymore.
Mhm.
And they're like, "We're opening a new one down in Arizona." They're like, do you want the job?" And I was like, I'm 18. I'm still living with mom and dad.
Mhm.
I've never lived by myself. So like, I'm like, I need to talk with my family first to figure out, what's the plan. And my mom, my dad, they're like, do it. What's the worst thing that happens, right? You come back home. You know
I
what I mean?
love
Like,
that. That's
whatever. And I
fantastic.
was like, that gave me the courage to be like, okay, you know what? Let's do it. Right. So I told them, okay, yeah, let's do it. Thinking I got the job. They're like, all right, now we need to interview you with the manager down there. I'm like, oh goodness. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
Got to fly down,
So
check it out.
yeah, and so well, first it was a phone interview.
Okay.
And so I get on the phone with him. His name is Brian Canning. One of the most like sincere people I've ever met. He's super nice, super caring. So we get on the phone, kind of start chatting a little bit. And instead of like going as like an interview, we were kind of just talking about video games. And we ended up talking about like Call of Duty. We're talking about like Black Ops 2 and stuff like that. And he's asked me, he's like, how would you test a game like that? Stuff like that, right? And at the end of it, he's like, okay, you're hired. He's like, when can you be
Wow.
here? And I was like, oh, okay. So we get all the dates set up, and I move down to Arizona, and I start working there. And when I get there, the company that I worked for is called Experience Game Solutions,
Mhm.
and they're a third party contract to Microsoft. So all the games that I ended up working on ended up being AAA titles. And the first game that I ever worked on was Crackdown 3,
Ooh.
which was meant to be like one of the launch titles for the Xbox One X,
Mhm.
all that stuff. And if anybody happens to know anything about the development of Crackdown 3, they know that it was it was bad. It was
Yeah,
rough.
like almost 10 years, right?
So I think the development ended up being, I think it was like 6 years,
Yeah.
but the problem was is we went through like a couple developers.
Well, okay. Yeah.
Developers kept kind of giving up, and because there was really no direction that the game was taking.
Hmm.
So they finally got the studios that they wanted. They went with a direction. The team that I was a part of was the multiplayer team.
Hmm.
Now the QA was just the 10 of us. Um, and basically, it was our job to test every aspect of multiplayer. Um, the problem that we ran into a lot of the time was um, the way the design system worked was we had to have a certain amount of people searching for it to find a match.
Hmm.
And so when you had days where some people weren't in, you didn't
Hmm.
have enough people, so you have to like use dead kits and things like that
Hmm.
to like kind of
Like
speed up the
essentially
process.
like a bot account or something,
Yeah,
or
that's
yeah,
basically all
yeah.
it is. It's just a body,
Yeah.
is what we would call them. Um, so the first title that I worked on was kind of rough, was not probably the best first experience you would want, right? But
Hmm.
what made it amazing and what really drew me to QA was the people that you work with and the team and the camaraderie that
Hmm.
comes with it is phenomenal. You make friends, you meet other gamers, you know what I mean? You meet a lot of people who are like you. And it's awesome because not only that, so many of those people come from so many different backgrounds. They came from doing so many other things. Um, when I started, I was probably the youngest person there. You know, I was
Hmm.
18 years old, and I was working with a guy who was like 56 years old doing QA. He's doing QA for video
Yeah.
games, and
Wow,
I
that's
was like,
awesome.
that was so cool to me. Like to be like, I could be doing this in 40 years. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I was
Seems
like,
like there's always demand,
it's
you
a
know?
career. You
Yeah.
know, like people can make a career out of it.
Hmm.
Um, so throughout my time at Experis, I worked there for about 4.5 years. I worked on a multitude of different games as a QA tester. I worked on the majority of the Age of Empires remakes.
Oh, cool.
I worked on Age of Empires 4. I've worked on a little bit on Forza Horizon.
Ooh.
I've worked on Gears 5.
Oh,
I
wow.
worked
That's
on
cool.
Gears Tactics.
Okay.
And then I spent 2 years on Halo Infinite.
Oh,
Um,
man. That's cool.
and on Halo Infinite is where my career kind of really started to take off in terms
Hmm.
of like in the QA space.
Hmm.
I went from being a tester to what that company calls a software test engineer, an
Hmm.
STE. And my job was basically I had a group of testers that I look over, right?
Hmm.
My job is to train them. My job is to, teach them and then also guide them and task them, you know.
Hmm.
And my performance is based off of their performance. So if
Yep.
they're not doing well, I'm not doing well, right?
Hmm.
And as that part of the job progresses, as I got promoted, I got more and more responsibilities. I started to learn
Hmm.
how to do what are called test planning. I learned how to work with other partners, external partners at 343 and Microsoft. I started to learn more about the software development lifecycle.
Hmm.
Um, and that's when I really started to notice, like, hey, I'm actually pretty good at this. Like, I want to devote time outside of work even to getting better at my job,
Sure.
whether that be searching up certifications to start working towards and things like that, right?
Hmm.
um, and so through working on Halo Infinite is how I met Quinn.
Yep.
Quinn was the sandbox designer, obviously, for the multiplayer side. And so we had, kind of interactions here and there. He was a little more higher up on the rung, so there was some like overlap, different hoops to jump through, to have those kind of conversations. But they happened, and obviously, I just happened to leave, a lasting impression.
Hmm.
And so he reached out to me. Um, I want to say June of 2022,
Hmm.
and he was like, "What are you up to?" And I'm like, "I'm still, still doing that thing." Um, you know, being that I was the sandbox STE, which means QA side I owned
Mm-hmm.
all, weapons, grenades, vehicles, Master Chief himself, player systems, all that stuff, like in-game customization, stuff like that. Like that was all on me to make sure that we tested that to
Mm-hmm.
our fullest extent that was possible. Um, and so he hits me up, asks how I'm doing. I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of starting to look for different places. I think,
Mm-hmm.
my skills could be utilized at an actual studio.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, yeah, well, we're starting to get to the point where we need some QA. And I was like, I'm totally open. I would love to go work, for you guys. Like
Oh yeah.
the idea that the whole open development to me was super cool because working on Halo Infinite, it was very frustrating because there were so many things that the community didn't know or didn't understand about how the development cycle works.
Mm-hmm.
That I wish that could be explained so much more to the community to help them understand. And that's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're making it so open. It's like, hey, we're at this point in our development cycle. Like, this feedback, we want this kind of feedback, or this is what we're looking for. We
Mm-hmm.
know what we want and we can tell the community that so they can provide that feedback to us. No other studios are doing that. And I was like,
Yep.
I want in on that.
Yeah,
We have,
that's great
yeah.
because like we talk about this on this show and throughout the community so much, and we brag so much about that open development approach.
Hmm.
And so I could totally see from your perspective too, like, man, like even on the development side, and there's, look, 343's had its controversies, and other studios do too. Everybody has it
Hmm.
to an extent, but I think the point is like, man, how cool would it be? Because there's so many good people that work at these companies, right? On the
Right,
surface level,
right.
you see a lot of the drama and like on the surface level, but like underneath that, there's so many amazing people and talented people at these studios. And like you said, it's no surprise to me hearing you say that. Man, wouldn't it be great if we could just talk to the community in a more
Right.
direct way? So yeah, that's I love that.
Well, what a lot of people don't see or quite understand is those bigger studios, they have those shareholders. They have the
Yeah.
people who have the money. The developers in those studios don't have as much say as people like to think they do.
Hmm.
Um, we can come up with the design, but if the shareholders and all the people who have the money don't like that design, it doesn't matter.
Right.
You know
Right.
what I mean? So, what's also great is, like you said, like there's so many good people at those companies.
Hmm.
I think Midnight Society is a perfect example of that. Is we have so many people who have come from, EA, PUBG, Call of Duty, all that stuff, right?
Hmm.
Halo, and these are the good people, you know what I mean, that
Hmm.
want to make the video games for the players, and it's not always just about money, 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 you know what I
Right.
mean? Like, yes, the gaming industry is a great source of income right now, and obviously, like, that's where everything is trending towards, so it makes sense. But those people who started it are still here, and they want to
Hmm.
continue that and make games for the gamers, for those people. So working with, Midnight Society and with open development has just, it's been fantastic, at least from the QA perspective as well. Being able to essentially have the community as my personal own QA testers has kind of been fantastic. So yeah, having the community as like QA testers has been super helpful. Because expectations to have me catch every single bug obviously is just, it doesn't make sense.
Hmm.
And so, getting all the bugs in the community bugs channel has been super helpful. Everybody's been super helpful in responding when I ask questions, things like that, adding extra info, whether it be media, grabbing logs, things like that. So that's been awesome and fantastic. So, yeah, Midnight Society and everything that it is was just super alluring. And so when Quinn had said, let's do this, had a couple interviews, ended up interviewing with Allison and
Oh, cool.
Alex. And then after that, Sumit was like, hey, can we talk? And I was like, oh man, CEO, like, I don't
Yeah.
know, like I was a little nervous. And the very first thing he says to me after, we'd been talking for a little bit, he's like, you made a really big impression on my team. And he's like, I can see why they liked you. And I like,
Man, that's cool.
that was just like the biggest like relief ever, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And by the end of it, he's like basically like, when can you start?
Yep.
And I'm like, wow. And I was like, let me make sure I give, my work, ample time. And so
Well,
from there
congrats
it
on
was
that, man.
just,
That's a big
yeah,
accomplishment, and
yeah,
I'm so happy to hear that it went that way, and we're obviously as the community super happy to have you, man. It's been
yeah,
great seeing you interact with everybody in
yeah.
the Discord so much, you know.
Yeah, I like to, keep it active. I like to make sure the community knows that we're here, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? We're more than just developers or QA testers or, whatever it may be, right? Um I think we tweeted something recently that was like, we play. I think a
Yep.
perfect example of that is like Darren and
Hmm.
Henry, like they're always hopping in,
Yep.
Friday night dead drops, playing with community. It's super great to see.
Yeah, I may or may not have been on the receiving end of some hand cannon shots from Henry, man.
Yeah,
I owe
yeah,
him one.
he's pretty deadly with that thing, dude.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
he
I
did
mean,
do the
hey, when you made the
animation, so
animation,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So no,
Yeah.
that's super cool. So so since you've been so just kind of piggybacking off of this background for you, like just real quick, like because we do have some main point questions here. What like so you've been with Midnight Society officially since summer of last year?
So it was actually December of
December, okay.
is when I signed the contract. Everything was ready, and I joined the team right before we released Snapshot 4.
Oh, cool. Okay.
I was on the team for a couple weeks before that, so we'd already had the build ready that we wanted to ship with and everything. So
Hmm.
I was mainly starting to test things for Snapshot 5 and things like that at that
Oh,
point.
cool. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that kind of does, since we're talking about bugs and, QA and those processes, this is a perfect segue into the first big question, which is what are some of the craziest bugs you've encountered in Deadrop so far? Like some
Man,
some real highlight moment stuff.
so so there's this one we found where I don't think the community actually found this one at all.
Oh, wow.
Because I think it had made it in the Snapshot 5. But you could smack people with your gun.
Like a melee?
No, in the sense, if you turned your DPI up and spin your character around, say you had the sniper rifle, has a very long barrel,
Yep.
you would smack people with it and they'd go flying off the map.
Wow. And I'm going to guess right now that's been fixed.
Oh yeah, that's been
Okay.
fixed.
Dang it, man.
Yeah, yeah. No, we were sitting on top of the crane, just a couple of us were just spinning around, smacking people off, and
Oh, wow.
that was a fun one. And then there was one that we had a repro case that we had fixed, which is now showing up in Snapshot 6, but we had a case where if you killed somebody climbing up a ladder,
Hmm.
their death bag would fall and land on your head and stay on your head.
Oh, wow.
And you would have a death bag as your head.
Okay.
And it would just sit there in your camera.
And
in
you can't
first
get it.
person.
And
You can't get it, nothing, and it's
Oh,
just
so it
there.
was like clipping through the character head
Yep.
of the character
Yep.
model's
So it
head.
looked like you just had a death bag as your
So
head.
you're just that's just your hat now. That needs
Yep.
to be a cosmetic in the game. That needs to be like a Easter egg cosmetic. I don't know if that would be UGC or if you guys would do it official, but like,
And
yo, I want that. I want a death. It's kind of like in Elden Ring, the pot. Like let me solo her. It has the pot.
That's kind of exactly where my mind was going when I first saw that.
Dude, let's do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And right now we're seeing something happen where if you attempt to drop a bag, or not attempt to drop it, but if you swap weapons or like holster your weapon while holding a death bag, it will just plop like into your camera.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. But yeah, those are some of the pretty crazy ones that I've found on Deadrop. Now, there are some bugs that I found on some previous projects that were pretty interesting. I think my most favorite one, and probably the most troll bug I think that's ever been found, is on Crackdown 3.
Okay.
And I ran into an instance where, so the game has like, I think it was party chat or like game chat basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
And somebody was like, I can hear somebody's like game audio coming like through their mic. And they were saying it was me. I was like, okay, well, let me mute my mic. And they're like, well, we still hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, that's weird. So I unplugged my mic and they could still hear my game
Oh
audio.
wow.
And I was like, well, that's interesting. And so we kind of like wrote up a bug for it, and like I was getting it all ready, and I was playing a song like while I was writing the bug, and I was in a game, and somebody goes, "Who's playing music
Uh-oh.
in game?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm listening to music right now." And they're like, "We hear your video or whatever in game." And I was
Whoa.
like, "You're kidding, right?" So we did some testing, and this all my audio was going into the game. And so what I decided to do was, being the 19-year-old child that I was, I decided to rickroll the devs
Oh.
by playing Never Gonna Give You Up in the video. So when they opened it during their triage, they would just get rickrolled. Um,
That's great, man.
yeah, that was probably the weirdest bug and like most
So
troll
what did
bug
it end
I've
up
ever
being? What
found.
was the cause?
So
Did they
they
figure it
ended
out?
up
Like,
like contributing it to like an external cause or
oh, okay.
some type of thing, probably with the motherboard or something they wanted to say.
Okay, yeah.
But that was a great day
Yeah, I
of
bet.
testing. That was a lot of fun.
I'm
Um,
sure y'all run into stuff like this with Deadrop pretty often. Stuff that you probably can't disclose yet because you're still like working on future stuff. But like, I'm really excited. I hope we get to do this again like later down the road because like hearing the kind of bugs you guys encounter sometimes offer some of the best stories like we've already had so far. Man, it's like
yeah,
I want
yeah.
I want that death bag as like a helmet or something.
Well, a lot of the time it's really like it's almost kind of taboo a lot of the times to talk about bugs that you found in development
Sure.
cuz devs don't want their bugs known, right? But a lot of the time it's like it's a part of the process. Bugs are just they're always going to be a part of developing games. It is impossible to make a game with no bugs
Yeah,
unless
flawless.
you're
Like
Gears
yeah.
Tactics, okay? That is
Oh,
the most stable game I've ever tested.
wow.
um when so when you submit a game to certification through Microsoft, whether that be for console or Windows 10 PC,
Hmm.
you have to go through certification. You have to get, gold certified, right?
Hmm.
And to do that, you have to pass a set of standards that they have. These are called Xbox requirements. They're called XRs.
Hmm.
And they have a giant list that you have to make sure you pass all these.
Hmm.
A lot of the times, most games do not pass certification on the first try. It
Hmm.
is it is very rare. It is not common.
Yeah.
And so when I was working on Gears Tactics, I had already worked on 3 AAA titles at that point.
Hmm.
And so every time we had not passed on our first try, not
Hmm.
once. When I tell you, when I started working on this game, I worked on it for 7 months.
Hmm.
I probably experienced maybe 3 crashes for 7 months in development, and
Wow.
we passed certification on first try with no crashes.
Man, y'all deserve an award for that.
I
Sounds like.
was I was blown away. I was like, there's no other project that I'll probably ever work on that will be like this. I
It's
don't
like, are
know
you
how the
guys sure
coalition
this is
does it.
okay? Is this
Yeah,
real? It's
yeah.
like,
The coalition does so good at
mhm.
stomping their bugs before they do their certification process, because a
Mhm.
lot of people probably don't know submitting for a certification is extremely expensive, and I'm talking like
Oh wow,
tens of thousands of dollars to
wow.
just submit.
Is
um
that because it's kind of like an auditing team that has to they have to pay for that auditing team to
uh
go through that stuff and go through the code and all that?
I couldn't exactly tell you why it's so expensive.
Sure,
I
sure.
definitely think that probably plays a role. But I think a lot of it probably has to do with it being a AAA quality title.
Hmm.
I feel even basically any game that needs to be released through or onto the Microsoft platform has to go through this certification.
Yep.
Um, Even like, for example, ports that come over or remasters,
Hmm.
even though these games have already been made and may have already been certified beforehand, they still need to go through this certification process because essentially it's a new title. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? There's new code, more than likely, new content within the game. This content needs to be verified by Microsoft that, hey, this is up to our standards that we're going to release this content and this title onto our platforms, basically.
Hmm.
It's like that entry fee, if that makes sense. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
no, that makes sense.
And if you fail, you got to pay that fee again.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
Hmm. Yeah.
All
And there
right.
are some projects, I'm not going to name any, but they went a lot.
Yeah.
Okay? And a lot. They spent a lot of money.
I would like to assume that a development studio probably tries to budget for these things, and then it's probably just a guessing game of like how many times does it take before you get the certification. I imagine the suits, and the leadership is probably responsible for like figuring out like what those budgets are for certification, things like that. But that kind of
Oh
does lead
yeah.
me into the next thing, which is like since you're kind of more on the I don't know if managerial role is like the way to say it, but you're a senior QA person. So, like, when it comes to prioritization, what's an example of how you and the team would tackle some of the most challenging issues? I'm sure there's different tiers and things like that. So, talk us through your process a little bit with that.
Yeah. So for us, with it being more of a smaller team, it's harder to find time to get all of the team into game, right? To play
Hmm.
test.
Hmm.
Because that's where we're gonna get the most beneficial bugs, right?
Hmm.
Obviously I can go into game and I can test as much as to my ability with the debug that we have available right now, right?
Hmm.
But when we can get 20 25 people in the game, that's where we really start to see some of those more significant kind of bugs that start to show up.
Hmm.
So for us, we try to really prioritize those bigger player playtests to find those more impactful bugs.
Hmm.
And one thing we prioritize is making sure that we're going through our backlog bugs, making sure that we're not losing any of the bugs that we've logged before, that hey, we're not quite ready to fix this bug right now, we're going to push it off later and make sure we're not forgetting about those bugs, right?
Hmm.
Because that's one of the biggest issues in bigger studios is issues and things tend to get put off, set to the side, and never get revisited. They kind of get put in the rear view. And so my biggest thing is making sure that just we're being on top of it. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So, you know, Allison and I do a really good job of making sure, like, hey, Quinn, Rob, other directors are in the know of what, our major bugs are right now, things like that.
Yeah. No, that's
So
great. It's cool to hear and I wonder. I guess just to kind of piggyback on that, like, so because we're in a unique scenario with Midnight Society and the open development approach, how does, and again, it's kind of the same question, but I'm adding to it, like, whenever a community, hey, we found this bug or this thing, and have you had situations where while you're trying to do your prioritization, boom, the community member says this happened, and you're like, oh no,
oh yeah.
ding, yeah, does that
Oh
happen a
yeah,
lot?
we've definitely had times where, for example, I think I'll have the root cause down of an issue.
Okay.
And next thing you know, there's a message in Discord saying, "Oh, there's actually this part of the issue that's even more crucial and even worse." That
Oh
makes
wow.
the severity of this issue even worse. Basic, every day, the start of my day, I go into the community Discord and I look through the issues
Hmm.
and I write them down. And my job then is to go in and investigate those issues.
Hmm.
So majority of the time, in my mornings, I spend the day looking at issues that the community has fed to me, basically. A lot of those issues might need extra bodies to investigate, so I might have to set those off to the side. But um, once they come through, once I've investigated them, that's really when I can kind of determine how severe that issue is, because some things can look really bad at face value,
Hmm.
but they might have a really, really, really low repro rate.
Okay.
And so, especially if something's really low in our public release where we have, tens of thousands of people playing, um, we can then say, okay, this issue really isn't as big of a problem, because where we have people who could be potentially running into this issue rather than just our 30, man team that we have, right?
Hmm.
Um, so that's really where I can gauge our priority and severity for bugs is if this is something that somebody's reporting to me or multiple people are reporting to me at the same time, I can tell like, okay, this is something that I need to look at. This is
Yep.
something everybody's telling me about. You know what I mean? Um, One thing we make sure to do is when we are in our bug triages, we make sure like, hey, this is an issue we found in our public release, right?
Hmm.
Make sure the team knows where these issues come from. That way we know how to properly handle those issues. Because in development, we have, there's always different branches that the teams will work out of. Make different changes in that way you don't kind of muddy the waters.
Hmm.
That way if you break something, it doesn't break everything, you know
Right.
what I mean? It only breaks it in this small portion or this branch. So there's a lot of factors that really go into the different prioritizations. So yeah, for prioritization, like there are so many different factors that we have to take into account for the different things that we're doing. Um, Especially being early on in our development.
Hmm.
Um, there are certain things that we don't have to prioritize nearly as much, right? Obviously right now, like our main goal is prioritizing, gameplay loop,
Hmm.
functionality, things like that, right? Obviously, I'm gonna run, different test passes for art and environment and things like that, but I'm not gonna be as frugal and as nitpicky as, I would be maybe in 6, 7 months. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
There are just certain things that I don't need to necessarily worry myself with at this moment in time. And one thing with that is understanding, the development life cycle and knowing that, hey, we're at this point, and also knowing like, hey, these are what the devs want me to look for as well. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like
Right.
this is the stuff that they're working on. So it's like, is that is what I'm working on going to benefit what they're currently working on, if that makes sense, you know?
Right.
So
That's actually
prioritizing just takes in a lot of different factors.
yeah, no, and that actually goes right into this next one, which is like, you end up working with not just, I mean, QA is everybody works together on the development team, but like, I guess from your perspective, like, I mean, you get to work with a lot of the different teams, right? Like the art
Mhm.
team, the, like Henry's animations, or, I mean,
Right.
you and your team are essentially testing bugs for all of that at any given time, right?
Right. Right.
So,
So with that, a lot of QA teams are now, I say this with, there are different types of development um life cycles. There are different ways to approach a development. And the way that also can determine how QA approaches it as well. Um, there are what are called verticals, and what
mhm,
these are is these are like the major features of the game. And a lot of the time, QA teams will set their own specific teams to go and test that specific thing, right?
mhm,
And a lot of times, what this does is for QA testers is they get what we like to call pigeonholed, right?
mhm,
They will just get stuck testing this one thing, and then they're not going to know the other stuff about the game, the other parts of the game that they need to test, right?
mhm,
um and so one thing that I've been trying to focus on is, being that I do have to test, like you said, every part of the game, whether that be art, physics, VFX, SFX, collision, like material sound effects. What does it sound like when I'm walking on the metal? Does it sound like metal? You know
right,
what I mean? Like there are people who just never notice those types of things.
right,
So one thing that I'm making sure of doing is making sure to keep documentation of, what are the different areas, those verticals, how to approach those. And then not only that, just how to write a bug. You know what I mean? Like
mhm,
not every bug is going to be written the same, because there are certain bugs that only need certain information.
mhm,
And so tackling the issues specifically and then documenting how I did it is going to help anybody that we bring on in the future, right? Making sure that we can test everything at once, because the goal isn't to get to the point where we have 10-man teams testing all these different verticals, you know what I mean?
Right.
We're not looking for that. We're looking to have a group of people, you know what I mean? Or maybe just a tiny handful, right? Um and so making sure that we have that understanding of this is all the aspects of our game, and then knowing who to work with, who to talk to, who to get the information from. Because if we get to the point where we don't have these things documented, we don't have um the information that contains, like, oh, this is what this system does,
Right.
right? um the testers aren't going to know how to approach that, because well, I say that in the sense of, if you're going with a black box method, which is I have all the documentation needed. I know how the systems work, so I can approach it with, I can use different test methodologies to
Right.
break this system. But when you're early on like this, we have, white, gray, and black box testing. We have white box where we have a system that we have, but we don't quite know where it's going yet. We don't
Yeah.
know what we're doing with it. So when you test it, you kind of have to have an open mind, like, hey, this is happening, but we don't really know if that's the intention, right?
Yeah, it's a
Um,
pre-alpha, so things are subject to change as you guys are realizing the
exactly.
vision of what Dead will be, right? Yep.
Exactly. So like that
Mhm.
that documentation, the things that we're taking note of is constantly changing. You know what I mean? We're getting
Yep.
iterations, different versions of those, right? And then you kind of move into a gray box where you have designs that you have the set that you want. This is what we're going to move forward with, and then you still have those portions that are that white box. We're not there. We don't know what we're doing with it yet. And then the black box is everything's there. You know exactly what you're testing. You have all the documentation you need, right? And so we're not there yet. We are not at the point where we can say, yeah, we've got everything. We know how to do it all, right?
So, like, when it comes to bugs and encountering this and that, I know in the Discord, we as a community, like, really are pretty much on point with this process. But, like, what would you say is, like, the best way that people can report bugs? Like, it maybe the in game. I think you can do it in game now, or there's like a feedback form or something. But, like,
hmm
if there's a real bug that we're encountering, like, what's like the best way that helps you guys out the most?
So I know a lot of the time, the majority of the community is not, obviously not always recording. They don't always have the ability to. Luckily, depending, on the system, whatever, you can always use NVIDIA Shadow Play. You can always use the game bar to try and capture, the previous 30 seconds or however long you set it to. That
Mhm.
can really help with issues, media, showcasing the issue that's happening, making sure to showcase at least 10 seconds before the issue happened and 10 seconds after really does
Mhm.
help as well, to kind of give context as to what's the actual outcome, or what was the person doing beforehand that caused this issue.
Right.
A lot of the times the hardest ones for me to reproduce myself are issues where they don't provide media, or if they have provided media, it's just, here's the issue, without any context as to necessarily how it happened, right?
Right. Right.
So making sure to kind of showcase that really helps. And then honestly, it's always best case scenario for any bug really to just provide logs if you
Yeah.
can. Um, Regardless of the issue, if we have logs, we can at least hopefully gain some sense as to what's happening, right?
Yeah.
We have certain logging in there that will help us determine if it's, maybe it's one of our ability systems, you know what I mean? Things like that.
Mhm.
So and then other than that, just being as descriptive as possible. Explaining the situations, what you were doing, how it happened, what happened afterwards. And then it really helps if this is something that you're hitting a lot. Knowing how often it's occurring also, helps provide more of an urgency to it. If it's something that I see once in the Discord that somebody said, "Oh, I hit this one time," I'm gonna set it aside and be like, okay, I'm gonna look at this one later, just because to me that's not as impactful as one that's been put in there 4 times and it has 20 people responding saying, "Yep, this happened to me too."
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Um, so always be as descriptive as possible with your
Yeah.
issues.
Kind of like when the
And
vendor was bugged, his inventory. Like
yeah,
that hit a
everybody
lot
was
of
like, "Yep,
people. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a perfect example.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then if you need help, finding logs, always feel free to at one of us, in the Discord, or even, one of the night command or sentries, they can help as well. So
Awesome, awesome. So the next time I die by the cleaners and there's 6 of them on top of a ladder, I'm DMing you directly and saying why. What? No, I'm just kidding.
no, we
No.
blame Brad, as
Oh,
Kairos
Brad.
does.
Yeah.
Everything is
It's
Brad's fault
Brad's
around
fault.
here.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. We
Yep.
need to get
Doesn't
him
matter
on.
what system, could be completely unrelated to maps. It's Brad's fault.
Totally, totally. All right, so the last thing for you, AJ, is and nothing spoiler. We're not here to ask for spoilers. That's not what the show's about. But like just in general, as a gamer, as someone who enjoys Dead Drop, what's like something you would like to have that you think would be cool to have in Dead Drop?
Hmm. I've thought about this a few times, and there are so many things that we could do with our game.
Sure.
And I think the biggest thing for me is what I find and get the most joy out of in FPS shooters,
Mm-hmm.
in in any game that has that competitive atmosphere, as I want a ranked mode.
Oh, there you go.
I want a ranked mode for, the core gameplay loot of Dead Drop. I would love to see some type of gameplay or game mode where it's similar to, you drop in, you find your loot, um and you extract out with all your stuff like normal, but determined on your how well you performed in that match. Hopefully the goal would be to, kills have more of a weight on how you perform, what your rank is, because I'm a person, I don't like ratting in my
Right.
opinion.
Yeah.
I'm not the biggest fan of slower paced gameplay style,
Campy McCamperson. We're not.
um
We're not dealing with Campy McCamperson, right?
yeah, no, I like to run and gun. I want to shoot you in your face.
Nice.
And so I just would love to see a good fleshed out rank system. I personally have been playing a lot of Apex lately. I've been having a lot of fun. This season's ranked is a little messed up. It's a little too easy. So I'm excited to see next season. And I loved ranked anything.
Mhm.
So I mean, I played CS:GO. I played H1Z1. Like, they all had great rank systems. Well, CS:GO is questionable, I will
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
After they changed their whole system, they did change that up, and it got real bad. But
Yeah. So
yeah, that's one of the biggest things I personally want to see is some ranked. I want to see a rank next to my name, and I want it to look cool. I
yeah.
want it to be
There
sick.
you go. Yeah, because it's not just the rank; it's like the visual aspect. Like how do I show that off as a player in game
Yeah,
who's like really good and or achieve different levels? Like,
exactly. Like,
yeah,
you can do it through your loot, you know what I mean? You can be like, "Oh, I have this much dust," you know what I mean? But
yep,
everybody's doing that stuff, you know what I
right,
mean?
right,
I
right,
want I want that Apex Predator rank, you know what I mean?
right,
I
right,
want
right.
to be the best of the best. So, I
Well, I
feel
know.
like with our game, it's a perfect scenario.
Yeah, I know. I know that UGC is something that's on the horizon. You know, Rob's talked about it. Everybody's talked about it. Now, I don't have any. So just for context for the listener, this isn't AJ saying we are getting anything. That's not what the question was about.
Yep,
It's
yep.
just as a gamer, what are things we like in FPS shooters? And as far as any modes or things, all of this is to be determined. It's an in
Mhm.
development game, so let's just get the expectations, set here.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
I know you're not alone in that. I know there's a lot of players in Dead Drop that like that's one of the first things they're looking for. And shout out to Rob, as he has said many times. You don't choose esports chooses you. So
Exactly.
I really think that based on a lot of the community members that we've seen and talked to and interacted with, that if there's a way to create it in UGC or a way to vote for it later or anything like that, I know there's a nice group of people in the community that are absolutely going to be gunning for that. So
Mhm.
I wouldn't be surprised if it does show up at some point. But again, folks, like we're just spitballing here. This is just for fun. So there's a lot of really cool stuff coming for Dead Drop, though. I know there's a lot of teases out there
Oh,
floating
yeah.
around right now. So I don't know. Now, we don't know officially when the next live event's going to be, but I'm looking forward to it. I know I'm going to save up my space dust and try to be there and meet all you guys and
Oh,
gals.
I'll be there. I'll
Yeah.
be there. So
Yeah, I'm hoping
I had a
to.
lot of fun in Texas. That event was my first event, obviously, with the company, and so um, being there, I got to be a part of the meet and greet with the devs. Got to talk to a lot of people, meet a lot of people. I got to sign some things. It was a whole like surreal experience, and so I'm only looking forward to the next one and getting to meet even more people who didn't get to make it to the last one.
Well, I got to go, but like you, there was so many people. That's the interesting thing, and you probably saw this too. Like, there's so many people that were there. It's like I met a lot of people, but there's so many I didn't get a chance to meet.
Exactly.
So, like, I'll be looking for you and Brad and a lot of these other guys and gals, and especially some of the ones I missed last time at the next event. Pending official announcement from Midnight Society, we are eagerly awaiting some more information about that, but it sounds like towards the end of the year, Midnight Society is ramping up for something. So stay tuned for that, folks.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah. AJ, thank you so much for coming on today and being a part of the show. It really means a lot, and I know the community is really going to enjoy this. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I had a fantastic time. I love talking about what I do. I have a passion for what I do. So
Yeah.
I love sharing it with people. I love talking with the community, telling them about what I do, letting them know about what we do, in Midnight Society, what we do day to day, things like that. That's stuff that people really latch onto. And when there's a studio that is cold and doesn't pay attention, it as somebody who's been a part of that, you feel left out. And so one thing is our Midnight Society has created such a friendly and open community, and so I only just feel obligated to help out and provide more info as much as possible.
Well, man, everyone super appreciates it. We love interacting with everybody. And before we let you go, what is the best place people can interact with you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. It's literally just my name, AJ Helling. And then you can also you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Same thing. It's AJ Helling. I haven't been as active on there, but I've been trying to be active on Twitter. Been streaming a little bit, so
Oh,
you
okay.
can catch me on Kick. Been trying there,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's where you
All
can
right. And
find
then,
me.
of course, the Midnight Society Discord too, right?
Oh yeah, I'll be
Yeah.
in there. Been trying to get in there more often. Been opening up my Fridays and Saturdays. So
Yeah. Hey,
be
you
prepared
gonna
to
be
catch
playing
me in there.
tonight?
I'm gonna be slaying.
You
Oh
gonna?
yeah.
Yeah.
You guys don't have enough of my tags. I mean,
Hey,
come on.
well, I got this
One
to
of the
worry
most
about,
rare.
so I'm trying, man.
Hey, it's a lot better now.
It is better. It is better, and I want to get somebody. Again, open invitation to all the developers, but anyone that deals with like controller movement, character movement, things like that. Like I would love to have that discussion.
Ryan Petrie.
Ryan
He's
Petrie.
gonna be
Okay.
your go-to guy.
Okay. Well, we're like I said, everybody's welcome. We love doing this. This has been great. Again, AJ, thank you so much for your time today. That's going to be it for this episode today, folks. So just remember to like, subscribe, hit the bell notifications so you don't miss out on any future Variant Intel episodes. And with that, thanks again, AJ, and we will see you in the tower. Have a good one, everybody.